Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the weekend of November the 2nd and 3rd, 2024. So this weekend, we have an opposition aspect between Mars and Pluto. You've got Mars in the last degree of Cancer, Pluto in the last degree of Capricorn, and yes, they are making an opposition. I think it is an important aspect, something we should consider. I want to look at what this opposition might mean, and I also want to consider a few famous people who have Mars opposition Pluto, and I've got a couple of them in the thumbnail. In fact, I've got 4 of them in the thumbnail. We've got Kim Yo-Jong has got a Mars opposition Pluto, probably, assuming we've got her date of birth right. There is a bit of controversy about her date of birth. Now, Kim Yo-Jong is the sister of Kim Jong-un, who is the leader of North Korea. Yeah, she has Mars opposition Pluto. So does Tulsi Gabbard, who has just moved over from the Democrat Party to the Republican Party, as she was, I think, in 2020, a candidate for the Democrat nomination. And yeah, in the meantime, she's become more supportive of Trump. And then Justin Trudeau has Mars opposition Pluto, and so does British comedian and YouTube personality Russell Brand. But there are others, and I'm also going to be looking at a few events that have Mars opposition Pluto. But before I look at Mars opposition Pluto specifically, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching of the weekend of November the 2nd and 3rd. Usual reminder, if you like this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to indeed indicate that you liked it. And if you like the video and you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. Anyway, let's look at what's happening this weekend. So here is the chart for the weekend. I've set it for midnight on Sunday, so the middle of the weekend. And so you can see that the moon at midnight in New York is at 29 something Scorpio. So it is on the verge of changing over from Scorpio to Sagittarius. And you'll also notice that Mercury at midnight on Saturday, Sunday is at 0 degrees Sagittarius. So we've got a sign change here. We've got 2 sign changes, and specifically we've got 2 planets. If you count the moon as a planet, I understand it as a satellite. 2 planets that were in Scorpio are moving into Sagittarius. There is a sudden Sagittarian emphasis. So, moon in Scorpio, we associate moon in Scorpio perhaps with strong emotions, powerful emotions, emotional intensity. It's about feeling rather than talking, and maybe that's a feature of Saturday. But then you move into Sunday, there's a change. Moon starts to move into Sagittarius. In fact, to be precise, London time, the moon moves into Sagittarius at 5:19 a.m. and so that's that really sort of happens early on Sunday. So if you're in Europe and probably Africa, for most of Sunday the moon is going to be in Sagittarius. If you're in Asia, Australia, New Zealand, it will moon will move into Sagittarius later in the day. Then we have got Mercury moving into Sagittarius. Now, that's important for a number of reasons. So firstly, it's moving into Sagittarius. It moves into Sagittarius London time at, I make it 7:15 p.m., which is sort of 8:15. No, it's not, because we don't have British summertime anymore. So we've got, Saturday evening, early Saturday evening in Europe, Mercury moves into Sagittarius. Now that will be sort of in the afternoon or even late morning if you're in the Americas. So if you're in the Americas, you've pretty much got Mercury, you've got Mercury in Sagittarius for most of a weekend. Now, that movement of Mercury moving into Sagittarius is important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, Mercury moving from Scorpio to Sagittarius, that's a change. Mercury is how we communicate. Mercury in Scorpio, it's not a particularly communicative place for Mercury. It's perhaps thinking and feeling, not really ready to put its head above a parapet. But Mercury in Sagittarius is a little more crazy. It's sparkling with energy, certainly verbal energy. Though Mercury in Sagittarius is in its detriment because Mercury rules Gemini. So Mercury in Sagittarius is traditionally not a sign in which Mercury works very well. So Mercury in Sagittarius, it needs to think things through. Yeah, in Sagittarius, it can't really think things through because it's a fire sign. It's too active for Mercury, and so Mercury can jump to conclusions. It can be wild speculation. I mean, I don't know if you remember the end of 2017. Mercury moved from Sagittarius into Capricorn, and I don't know if you remember the end of 2017, but it was at the absolute end of the cryptocurrency bubble. Cryptocurrency just in 2017, all the cryptocurrencies just went completely ballistic in a very short period of time. And it was kind of as Mercury went into Sagittarius. And the bubble burst as Mercury moved into Capricorn. And I think at the end of 2017, Saturn was also moving into Capricorn. So I think that made it more intense. But Mercury moving from Sagittarius into Capricorn sort of burst a bubble. But then on the other hand, you could say Mercury into Sagittarius created some kind of a bubble. I'm not making any financial advice there. I'm just pointing out something historically. But when Mercury moves into Sagittarius, okay, it might be in its detriment, but it also moves into mutual reception with Jupiter, because Jupiter is in Gemini. Jupiter is in Mercury's sign, and Mercury is in Sagittarius, which is Jupiter's sign. Mercury-Jupiter mutual reception. And so, in a way, you could say, although Mercury is moving into Sagittarius, its position is strengthened, and also Jupiter's position is strengthened. So straight away, Jupiter becomes much stronger because Jupiter had been peregrine. Jupiter has, it doesn't have much dignity here. It's retrograde, it's in Gemini, it's in its detriment. But then we've got this mutual reception, which gives both planets a great deal of strength. And is that going to have an impact on the election? Almost certainly. I've made my point about the election. I think actually in this video I don't really want to talk about the election, but really, not really. But I mean, I have a view which I know some people have disagreed with me. I've even found somewhere on the internet where my views have been cited and regarded as being too traditional and so forth. I don't know, but there is a view. I think comes from Barbara Waters. I think she wrote a book called Astrology and a Judgment of Events, which took the view that Jupiter rules the Republican Party and Saturn rules the Democrat Party. And some people have said, no, it's not. That's not true. Jupiter rules the Democrats. But you look at this campaign. I think this campaign certainly demonstrates to me that Jupiter rules the Democrat Party, Jupiter rules the Republican Party, and Saturn rules the Democrat Party. There is something quite dour about the Democrat campaign. Don't do this. You've got to do that. It's kind of telling you what to do. invoking fear, whereas I think the Republican campaign has been much more positive and upbeat, and it's sort of had a certain sort of lightness to it, and there's been a certain sense of humour to the Republican campaign, at least in my view, in my subjective impression. But so you could argue Mercury moving into Sagittarius strengthens Jupiter, and therefore strengthens the Republican Party, and therefore increases Trump's chances of winning the election. I should point out, though, that in 2012, the Republican Party lost, and there was a mutual reception between Mercury. That was when Obama beat Romney, and in that election, we had Obama's Democrats beat Romney's Republicans, and Mercury was in Sagittarius and Jupiter was in Gemini. So in that case, that certainly didn't help the Republican Party. But I don't really want to talk about this election really in this video. So those are the main things going on. There are a few other things we might want to consider. Mercury just before it moves into Sagittarius, it makes a trine to Mars. So Mercury trine Mars. There may be things we have to say that we want to say, and we may be able to speak with great conviction about the things we believe in. And at the end of the weekend, we've got two aspects on Sunday: Mars opposition Pluto and Venus opposition Jupiter. And Mars opposition Pluto, I will be talking about it a lot more at the end of this video, but it is potentially about some kind of power struggle, us being very into being in control and perhaps being afraid of other people controlling us, and things are quite intense. Even though the Moon and Mercury are out of Scorpio, we can feel that struggle, and it's becoming really quite tangible. And I suppose that definitely got a link with the election. Just 2 days left. By Sunday, there will be 2 days left. And the polls are narrowing. The betting markets are narrowing. You know, betting markets certainly, up until about 2 days ago, were, there was a time when they were really supporting Trump, but now the betting markets are sort of going against Trump. I don't know why that is. Maybe people were betting as a sort of, in a way that they were opening a bet, and they were waiting for the bet to. They were treating the bet like a share, and they were trying to sort of maximize their profit. But now it's the real thing. You haven't got time to let your bet run and maybe close it and move it into something else. Now it's the real thing. And so I suppose the betting markets are perhaps reflecting the general view that it is supposedly a dead heat. And we also have Venus opposition Jupiter at the end of the weekend. And Venus opposition Jupiter provides a very different energy to Mars opposition Pluto. Venus opposition Jupiter, I mean, it might sound like a nice aspect, Venus, Jupiter, the benefics, but it's a little bit overindulgent, I would have said. It sort of wants to push things too far. And so perhaps with Venus opposition Jupiter, we don't want to spend too much money. We don't want to eat too much. We don't want to drink too much. We don't want to over-emote. We don't want to be over-optimistic. These might be features of Venus opposition Jupiter. We don't want to take things too far. So overall, actually, this weekend, there's a lot going on. We've got, Mercury moving into Sagittarius, Mercury moving into mutual reception with Jupiter. We've got Moon moving into Sagittarius. We've got Mercury trine Mars. We've got Mars opposition Pluto. We've got Venus opposition Jupiter. It could be quite a busy weekend, and it might be a little bit of a changeover weekend where the energies do change. And I'm particularly thinking of Mercury moving into Sagittarius. And we shouldn't forget, though, that Mars is currently at 2939, I think, Cancer. Mars is actually about to move into Leo, and early next week, by the time the election is on, by the time of the election, Mars will be in Leo. So that's another changeover taking place. So if you think, as you're watching this video, that this is the world as it is, the world, and you're watching before the weekend, by Monday, things may have completely changed. And the vibe might have changed. People's attitude might have changed. Those in America that haven't cast their vote early, there might be a change of mind. There might be some kind of change that does have an impact. Okay, not just on the election, but on the world in general. So, very quickly, that is the position of the planets, the middle of a weekend from a perspective of New York. Just to give you the position of the planets from a perspective of Sydney, Australia. Remember, Sydney, Australia is just a representative of Australia, New Zealand, East Asia. And you can see that at the middle of a weekend in Australia, moon is in Scorpio, and Mercury is still in Scorpio, but particularly the moon is still in Scorpio. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, it could be more of a moon in Scorpio weekend. The moon will run through until, I don't know, sort of off the top of my head, sort of until Sunday evening. The moon will be in Scorpio. So for most of a weekend, the moon will be in Scorpio, and Mercury will be going to move into Sagittarius on Saturday. It doesn't really matter. It's it's probably Saturday morning. So it's Sunday morning. So Mercury still goes into Sagittarius on Sunday, but not too late on Sunday. But still, if you're in Australia and New Zealand, it may be more of a continuation of a moon in Scorpio experience until the evening, and you may really start to really feel the Sagittarius energy. You might not feel that until Monday. So there's a slight difference of emphasis, for example, between Sydney and New York. Turning to the heliocentric picture. So this is the position of the solar system with the Earth in the middle, and so I'm not too sure what there is to report. Mercury is sextile Saturn, so you can see that Mercury is in Capricorn, sextile Saturn in Pisces. Saturn in Pisces. Remember, from a heliocentric view, I do understand that geocentrically Mercury is moving from Scorpio into Sagittarius, but geocentrically, heliocentrically, it's in the middle of Capricorn, making a sextile to Saturn. And I suppose the heliocentric view gives a sort of a calmer picture. In fact, look at this. We've got Mercury at 17 Capricorn, Venus at 17, 18 Aquarius. So we have got Saturn at 17 Pisces. So we've got 3 planets at 17. So that perhaps calms things down. That perhaps provides a different view. Mercury moving into Sagittarius and Moon moving into Sagittarius geocentrically, yet Saturn is emphasized. We've got Mercury sextile Saturn. We've got Venus conjunct the Mercury-Saturn midpoint heliocentrically. This is an example of a midpoint you can certainly see by eye. So perhaps that calms things down. That's about serious thinking. We're not perhaps too sure who we can trust with Venus on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint. Venus could be about relating, but it's on Mercury-Saturn midpoint. We're careful what we say, and there is a certain caution there, I think, with Mercury sextile Saturn and Venus semi-sextile Saturn. So, that's probably the main feature of the heliocentric chart. All right, now I want to look at the weekend from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of November the 2nd and 3rd of November the 2nd and 3rd, 2024. Aries. Aries, there is a process of change going on. I do think that recently, many Arians have been a little more introspective than usual, and you have been valuing your privacy, and you felt that you weren't fully able to be yourself. And I think in some respects this might have been a good thing, because you had a chance to take a step back, to reflect, and perhaps to listen to your feelings. And that's not something that every Aries wants to do all the time. Aries, as with every other sign, has strong feelings. In fact, Aries can be very quick to show its feelings, but it likes to be done quickly. Things like to be expressed. You don't want to mess around, play games. You just want to say it as it is. But recently it just may have been a little bit difficult to express how you feel. But now we have got planets moving into Sagittarius. So the moon is moving into Sagittarius, and also Mercury is moving into Sagittarius. Okay, that moon movement into Sagittarius, you may not feel that until quite late in the weekend if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but at some stage the moon will move into Sagittarius. But over the weekend, Aries, you will feel that things are getting faster, that you're seeing possibilities where in the past you didn't see any possibility at all. It just all seemed too complicated. And at the same time, I think that you can afford to be more imaginative. Aries does have good imagination. Mercury is always about, Aries is always about what is possible. Let's at least give it a go. But those possibilities maybe have been few and far between over the last few weeks. But with planets moving into Sagittarius, it's a fast sign. Moon, Mercury moving into Sagittarius, there's a changeover. There's more energy now, and perhaps you can be more your normal self. And if you want something to happen, you can just go and do it. There's a free flow of energy, and that is certainly something that is to be welcomed. But we cannot deny the fact that Mars is now making an exact opposition to Pluto, and that does give a slightly different emphasis. So Mars is, of course, your ruler, so it's opposition Pluto. Pluto is a planet that is quite intense, and it may feel that something quite substantial is going on behind the scenes, and you are still, even though Mercury is moving into Sagittarius, Moon is moving into Sagittarius, you're still going to be aware of what is holding you back, and you may feel that it's time to actually address this power struggle. And perhaps there's been a power issue that has been implied but hasn't actually come to a head. But now this power issue is coming to a head, and it doesn't feel good. And you, as far as you're concerned, there are winners and losers, and you would like to be a winner, and you perhaps feel that you are really going to have to struggle if you're going to be able to see through your victory. And Mars, last degree of Mars is in the last degree of Cancer. It is about to move into Leo. Now that raises another set of complications, because, as we know, Mars moves into Leo, then it goes retrograde at 6 degrees Leo, then it goes back into Cancer. So yes, Mars is about to leave Cancer, but when it leaves Cancer, it will just go back into Cancer. But in the end, but with Mars in Cancer, opposition Pluto, you are very aware of what you have and what is yours and what you need to protect, and you're also aware of what threatens you, what is a challenge. And this is a situation perhaps where you feel you need to take the whole thing head on and not duck out of it. So it may be when we see Mercury moving into Sagittarius, Moon moving into Sagittarius, it's certainly nice that the Moon and Mercury are moving into Sagittarius, but you may also feel that gives you the impetus and the power and the energy to address some quite important but lingering issues. Now is the time. You don't want to leave it any longer. Taurus, other people recently have been quite important to you. I think that has perhaps been reflected by the recent new moon. We've had a new moon in Scorpio, new moon in your opposite sign. So with that new moon, you've certainly become aware of other people's importance and what kind of impact they have on you. There are things that you would like to do, and perhaps you haven't been able to do them because you've had to consider what other people want. It's not just about what you want, and that might actually have been slightly irritating. But you could say, well, at least you know the truth of the matter with this new moon, and this new moon might also have indicated that certain relationships have changed, or perhaps relationships have taken a new turn and you're perhaps getting used to that. But this Scorpio emphasis, we have recently had a lot of planets, is starting to break up, because we've got the moon moving out of Scorpio, we have got Mercury moving out of Scorpio, and these planets are moving into Sagittarius. So by the end of a weekend, we're going to have 3 planets in Sagittarius: Moon, Mercury and Venus. At the beginning of a weekend, we had Moon and Mercury in Scorpio and Venus in Sagittarius. So the Scorpio emphasis by the end of a weekend will be pretty much, not entirely over, because we've still got the Sun in Scorpio. But one has to think, what does that mean if you're a Taurus? Well, I think if you're a Taurus, that means that you do get an impression of what it means. You get an impression of what other people are really like. It's like, you meet someone, you talk to someone, you get an idea of who they are. And then, at a later stage, you start to understand who they really are. And perhaps with these planets moving into Sagittarius, you do understand what people are like never before. And you get insights into what makes them tick, what motivates them, into not just their surface appearances, but perhaps the dark side to their personality, their capacity for evil as well as their capacity for good. I know that sounds a bit melodramatic, but it's always good to understand someone's capacity for evil. We've all got a capacity for evil. And the sooner we understand other people's capacity for evil, well, the better for everyone. And everyone has an agenda. And we've got, for example, this weekend we've got Mars opposition Pluto. Mars might be representative of another person, the other people that are important in your life. Mars opposition Pluto. Other people are interested in power. Other people are interested in asserting themselves. Perhaps they want control over you at some level. And so these are things, Taurus, that it certainly is worth your while considering. And you might then feel that a little bit of distance might actually be a good thing. And we might then want to look at the heliocentric chart. So I looked at the heliocentric chart, and I mentioned the fact that Venus, Mercury and Saturn are all at sort of around 17, 18 degrees of the sign in the heliocentric chart, not the geocentric chart. And in fact, Venus is on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint. And so Venus on a Mercury-Saturn midpoint might be giving you some impression about the best way to behave. And Venus on a Mercury-Saturn midpoint is being cautious. Mercury-Saturn is about caution. It's about thinking things through, not necessarily saying the first thing that comes to mind, and also being a little bit negative. Negative in a positive way, though. Negative like thinking, well, this isn't all about peace and light and happiness. Let's consider the possibility that someone is perhaps up to no good, or they're making a mistake, or that you don't actually need them in your life. So a serious and reserved approach where you err on the side of caution, especially when dealing with other people, could work in your favor. Okay, it might not make you popular, but this weekend in particular, it's not a popularity contest. That's not what it's about. It's all about getting through the weekend and maintaining your power and control. And I do think that is something that you can do. Gemini, the big news this weekend is that Mercury is changing sign. And Mercury's sign change, I believe, is quite important. So we've had Mercury moving into Scorpio, and then it moves into Sagittarius. So for you, I think that that could have quite an important impact. So in one sense, Mercury moving into Sagittarius may say something about you and other people. Sagittarius is a sign in the Gemini chart, which is often associated with the other, with relationships. It may not be individual people. It may be whatever it is out there in the world which has an impact on you and may perhaps limit your freedom of action. Could be organizations. It could be whatever you imagine might restrict your freedom of action. When with Mercury and Sagittarius, there is a possibility that you exaggerate. You might believe that something is a problem or someone is a problem when maybe they're not. Maybe it's just your projection. But still, considering other people, paying attention to other people and how they influence your life is certainly a good idea. And in certain cases, it might be a good idea to let other people take the lead. You can't be taking the lead all the time. It can't be always you having the ideas, you making the decisions. Sometimes it's just a good idea to just perhaps enter into someone's territory, provided you trust them, of course, and let them set the rules. See where these rules go. If you don't like it, you can always leave. But perhaps give people a chance to express themselves, in their own way, and just see what happens. And Mercury moving into Sagittarius, in some respects, is a little bit of a two-edged sword, because Mercury is in its detriment in Sagittarius. Now, that might mean that you are perhaps, I I hate to say this, and I don't mean this I don't want to be disrespectful, but you may be ever so slightly gullible with Mercury moving into Sagittarius. And remember, I'm a Gemini too, so I'm talking to myself as well. I can be very gullible, yes. I don't know about you, but there may be a tendency perhaps to believe what people say. Perhaps because you want to believe what people say. It sounds good. So, I mean, we do this all the time. We choose the messenger that makes us feel most comfortable, don't we? I mean, it's I suppose with the breakdown of sort of mainstream media and all, you can get news on so many different channels. If you want conspiracy theories, you can find them. And of course, now we're finding that many conspiracy theories, I suppose, are often, there's a germ of truth there. But, we choose the channels we like. We choose the people that tell us what we want to hear. But, try to have a little bit of reflection there. Don't necessarily believe what someone says, even if you enjoy what they're saying. Even if you've chosen people, perhaps, or entities on the internet that just reflect your own beliefs back at you, just watch out for that. And so so Mercury, that is one problem with Mercury moving into Sagittarius. And I don't get too excited about things. Don't be too speculative. Just because it's a good idea, just because the rewards seem to be immense, doesn't mean you should go for it, because there might be a downside. Now, on the plus side, though, Mercury, when it moves into Sagittarius, it makes a mutual reception to Jupiter. And so Mercury actually has dignity. And Mercury opposition Jupiter, they're in opposite signs, but they are kind of moving towards an opposition, because Mercury in Sagittarius is moving to an opposition of Jupiter in Gemini. But so there's a certain difficult relationship between Mercury and Jupiter. But because they are in each other's signs, they are in mutual reception, that means you get dignity and you get strength. And, this might indicate, it may indicate something just generally about you, that you're actually in a stronger position, even though perhaps you're at heightened risk of jumping to conclusions. Maybe you're a little more gullible than usual. In spite of that, you are stronger. And this strength may also be reflected in a relationship. It may be good for relationships, Mercury moving into Sagittarius in mutual reception to Jupiter. It may be that you and someone else who may be very different from each other, but somehow you have common ground, and there are things you can share and things you can exchange. And so from a relationship perspective, overall, provided you're careful, I think that Mercury moving into Sagittarius is a good thing, and it can strengthen relationships, and also, I think, provided you handle things right, it can strengthen you. Cancer, we've got Mars in the last degree of your sign. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's a big relief that Mars is about to leave Cancer. While Mars has been moving through Cancer, and it's been moving through Cancer for some time. When did Mars go into Cancer? I should be able to. Sorry, I should just know that immediately when Mars moved into Cancer. Mars moved into Cancer on the 5th of September. So Mars has been in Cancer for nearly 2 months. I mean, I don't know what the last couple of months have been like, but with Mars moving into Cancer, there may have been times where you felt that you had to look after your own interests. you perhaps had to be selfish. I mean, I know that the word selfish has bad connotations, but sometimes you just have to be selfish. I think it's important. And so I'm hoping that over the last couple of months, you were able to look after your own interests, and you perhaps feel more secure and defended than you did 2 months ago. And yeah, Mars is getting ready to leave Cancer. Now, it's a temporary. It temporarily leaves Cancer. So, what's happening is that Mars leaves Cancer, moves into Leo, goes retrograde, and then then it goes retrograde, and then soon enough it will be back in Cancer. So, Mars leaving Cancer it's just a temporary thing. It will be back, but Mars in the last degree of Cancer, I think, does perhaps emphasize yourself and perhaps what you're struggling against, because Mars in Cancer is making an opposition to Pluto. So on Sunday we've got Mars opposition Pluto. Okay, I think pretty much wherever you are in terms of time zone, Mars is going to be opposition Pluto. And so this for you may just be a reminder of how important it is to look after yourself. That there are some people who can't be trusted, and issues of power could be very important to you. Not just on Sunday. I mean, this Mars opposition Pluto has been building up for some time. I've been talking about Mars opposition Pluto quite a lot. So this opposition has been building up. You have been feeling it for some time, and now perhaps it's getting really strong. I think when Mars moves into Leo. I think Mars moves into Leo. It's on Monday, Monday or something. I think Mars is about to move into Leo, and that may temporarily take some of the pressure off. But it is perhaps, as far as you're concerned, a little bit of a zero-sum game. A zero-sum game. Who's a winner? Who's a loser? And I think that's perhaps very much what you're thinking about at the moment. Now, don't get too worked up by this whole thing. Perhaps what you need to do is with this Mars opposition Pluto is just maybe sort of take a step back and perhaps tell yourself that it's a sign that you live in a complicated world, but there's a limit to what you can do. There's a limit to what you can change, and perhaps you need to focus on your small part of the world and making sure that you are in control of it, that it's structured in a way that you find comfortable. And with the Moon and Mercury moving into Sagittarius, it's perhaps a time to imagine how you would like things to be, how you'd like things to be done, how you'd like things to be organized. And if you have a view about this, then perhaps put it into practice. Tell everyone this is the way it's going to be done from now on. And so this weekend perhaps could be a new start. You can't, as I said, you can't control everything. The world out there is complicated and chaotic, but what you can do is put into practice your thoughts and your imaginings in terms of your own world, the world that you are in control of. And I think you're going to be able to do that quite easily. I mean, easier than you realize. And so, it's not just about the weekend. It's through until Monday, beginning of a week. So, giving yourself security and creating a secure, well-balanced and ordered environment for yourself is something you can do, and it's there's no time like the present, so maybe you should just get on with it. Leo, we have some important changes. We have Mercury and the Moon moving into Sagittarius, and I think from a Leo perspective, that's quite welcome. It allows you to have sort of more freedom and more space, because over the last, I don't know, couple of days, even couple of weeks, you may not have had as much confidence as you would have liked to have had. And I'm not saying you lacked confidence, but I think you would have liked to have been more confident. And maybe, Leo, you hadn't been particularly trusting for one reason or another, and perhaps you put a priority on safety. I'm not talking about safety in terms of necessarily of anything dangerous. You just wanted things to be safe and secure. I know that's very nice, but it can reach a stage where it all becomes a little boring, and you feel that your horizons are being blocked and that you haven't got much freedom. But with the Moon and Mercury moving into Sagittarius, there is a change, and it is a change for the better. And I think, Leo, you're going to start to become aware of new possibilities. And, these possibilities are, in the first instance, in yourself. Perhaps you've actually underestimated yourself. Perhaps you felt that if you were to have maximized your potential, you would have been taking too many risks. Perhaps you thought you might have been exposing yourself to criticism, or you'd expected people to be judgmental. Well, that's all over now. I think that you can now be yourself without any fear of being criticized or being judged, and you can really tune into who you are and what makes you uniquely creative. And this is a process that will, I think, gather speed over the next few weeks through November. Don't forget, we've got the Sun at some stage will move into Sagittarius. Off the top of my head, I don't know when is it, sort of November the 22nd, somewhere around there, the Sun moves into Sagittarius. So with these planets moving into Sagittarius, it's a fire sign. It gives you the fire you need, perhaps a fire you feel that at some level has been missing. Yes, I understand Venus has been in Sagittarius for some time, but with the Moon and Mercury moving into Sagittarius, that, I think, does give you a new spark. And I think that when we look at what's going on, I think there are really grounds for, I suppose, considerable optimism. Now, just a reminder, though, one thing I should point out, though, is that Mars is on the verge of entering Leo. Okay, it doesn't happen over the weekend, but it will happen. I think Mars moves into Leo. When does Mars move into Leo? Mars moves into Leo. Okay, that happens on Monday. So on Monday, in fact, I think US time, it might actually be very late on Sunday. So in fact, if you're an American Leo, then very late on Sunday, Mars moves into your sign. And so, I'll be talking more about it, but Mars moving into Leo is going to be a time when you are going to be quite dynamic, and dynamic in the sense that you may actually be prepared to take people on. There may be a sense of conflict here, that you feel that some things have to be fought over, and you're going to start to want to assert yourself. And I think you're probably already starting to feel it. You have perhaps sort of kept your light under a bushel for long enough, and you're ready. And increasingly, if anyone is holding you back, you're going to want to fight back. So if you are planning any battles, do get it right. I mean, there's no point in having an argument or a fight just for the sake of it. But I do think that over the next few days, even by the end of a weekend, you may actually be a lot more assertive and pugnacious than you have been of late. Virgo, we have a sign change. We have a couple of sign changes. We've got Moon moving into Sagittarius, and we've also got Mercury moving into Sagittarius. Now, that Mercury moving into Sagittarius, I think, is actually quite important for you. So Mercury is, of course, your ruler. So when we're trying to understand what's happening to Virgos, we do track Mercury very closely, and with Mercury moving from Scorpio to Sagittarius, some of your emphasis does change. I mean, I think your emphasis has been starting to change, but I think many Virgos are starting to feel that they want a sense of stability. And you may have felt that recently that stability and grounding has been something very on and off. It just hasn't quite been there. And this, I think, has something to do with the fact that at the moment there's not much Earth around. Uranus and Pluto are in Earth signs, but nothing else is in Earth signs except the Moon. Every 9-10 days the Moon moves into an Earth sign. It stays there a couple of days and it moves out, and the Moon is not in an Earth sign right now, so there isn't much Earth. And you are an Earth sign, and you want some grounding, and you want something to stand on, and it just doesn't feel that it's there. And with Mercury moving into Sagittarius, you are reminded of this, and you feel that you do need something secure in which to plant yourself. And there's also this strange restlessness about it. I mean, being restless and wanting security do seem to be contradictory. I mean, if we're restless, then we're moving from place to place. But if we want security, we're trying to focus on one place. And it may be this sort of element of trying to get comfortable. I suppose you may feel, and I don't mean this literally, I may be literally, but I don't think I mean it literally, is it may be like you're in a bed, but it's not a particularly well-made bed. The mattress isn't great, or things aren't quite right, and you're constantly moving around trying to get comfortable, and you're not getting comfortable. And that may be part of the experience of Mercury moving into Sagittarius. Now, that might sound like a negative experience, but as you move around, as you try to get comfortable, it seems there is a place somewhere on that mattress where you can be comfortable. It's a kind of a very uneven mattress, but you finally get to be comfortable. And that's perhaps what you are looking for, what you are striving for. And in a way, it's perhaps good that it's so difficult to get comfortable, because it makes you, I mean, obviously it's not good short term, but it makes you aware of different possibilities. There is a place, but where is that place? And finding that place could be hard work. And Mercury in Sagittarius is moving into Sagittarius, is asking you to be imaginative and to be thinking of new possibilities. So I suppose we want to continue with the mattress analogy. I suppose there may be all sorts of ways of getting comfortable. Maybe you should sleep in a hammock rather than a bed, for example. I mean, I'm not saying you should. And if your hammock, I know hammocks seem to be a bit dangerous. If the hammock falls and you break something, don't blame me. But you know what I mean. I'm just talking in a sort of a symbolic, metaphorical way. But it perhaps is asking you to consider alternative possibilities for finding comfort, and also in terms of your own home. You know that having a sense of home is important, but the concept of home may need to be reconsidered, and you may have to consider something completely different in terms of finding real comfort and security. Now, Mercury, when it moves into Sagittarius, it does make a mutual reception to Jupiter. And that mutual reception to Jupiter, because Mercury is in Sagittarius, the sign of Jupiter. Jupiter is in Gemini, the sign of Mercury. That mutual reception between Mercury and Jupiter, I do think that it is useful, and it may manifest in a few ways. One possibility is that mutual reception between Mercury and Jupiter could be about getting on with someone. It could be about relationships. Just finding someone who perhaps is very different from yourself, but you still just get on with them. You just feel that there's just a connection, and it is very much a union of opposites. So if you're looking for new relationships, you should not be looking for someone who is just like you. You should be looking at someone who is perhaps very different from you, but who nonetheless complements you. And we do have the idea here of two people who are very different from one another, who can help each other. They've got what they each other need. Now, that could be something to do with, it could be to do with romance or, personal relationships. It may be about an existing relationship. Perhaps you're in a relationship that's doesn't feel that it's going absolutely wonderfully recently, but maybe you can start to reconsider it and say, well, actually, there is potential. It's not as bad as it looks, and it's the differences that perhaps make the relationship special, and it's a way the differences kind of can balance each other and can help each other. But it can have nothing to do with romance or anything interpersonal or personal. It can be about some kind of partnership, a temporary partnership. You get someone's help. You and someone else can help each other. You can perhaps help each other in terms of perhaps a project, a piece of work, and I think you can really make up for each other's deficiencies. And okay, once you've done what you have to do, you can go your separate ways. But don't feel, Virgo, that you have to do everything on your own, because I think there are people out there who can be very useful. I mean, they might even be comforting. Who knows? They might even, despite surface appearances, be able to provide you with a degree of security. Libra, we have a few sign changes today, and we've got, it's not today, sorry, it's the weekend. Over the weekend, Mercury moves into Sagittarius, and Venus has been in Sagittarius for some time. The moon also moves into Sagittarius, and I think, Libra, that on balance those sign changes are quite useful. I think they're going to make it easier for you to express yourself, tell the world who you are and what you want and what you believe. Sometimes Librans can try too hard to keep everyone happy. I mean, I know that's a bit of a Libran stereotype, so textbook Libra, Of course, not every Libran is like that. Margaret Thatcher was a Libra. Vladimir Putin was a Libra. I think Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, who is quite a controversial person, who's not in the business of making everyone happy. He's a Libran. So we can take this stereotype of Libra too far, and I think that maybe with these planets moving into Sagittarius, you can start to express yourself in new ways, and also I think you can be more blunt. That may be how Mercury moving into Sagittarius could work, just being absolutely clear about what you like and what you don't like, and you don't have to keep it to yourself anymore. So I think that Mercury moving into Sagittarius is just going to make it easier to get that message across. And I don't think you should worry too much about how that message is received. There's nothing that can be done. If it's bad news, it's bad news. If you want to criticize someone, well, that's the way it is. If someone's done something wrong, you've got to tell them. And maybe as a Libra, you can make some effort to sugarcoat the pill, but what's the point of sugarcoating? The sugarcoating is going to sort of fade away in the end. We know what is at the heart of the message. And also with Mercury moving into Sagittarius, it may have some impact on the way you travel and your attitude to traveling. And I'm not talking about long distance traveling, short distance traveling. You may be perhaps more adventurous, not just over the weekend, but over the next perhaps few weeks, about how you go from A to B. Maybe there are different ways of going to A to B. Maybe you no longer have to go from A to B. Maybe you have to start going from A to C or somewhere else. So in terms of short distance travel and how you conduct your short distance traveling, do expect a few changes. And they may be changes that you actually want to bring about, perhaps because you're bored, or perhaps there are new opportunities to go to different places. And while you're at it, Libra, don't forget your neighbours, the people who live right next to you, the people you sometimes don't talk to, or you very often don't talk to. There is perhaps something that needs to be said, perhaps something that could be said with Mercury moving into Sagittarius. So I suppose it could be the case that you feel that there's some issue what you want to discuss with your neighbour, and maybe you haven't had the courage to bring it up, but maybe now is the time to bring it up. When I talk about neighbour, it could be someone who is living in the next house, or an apartment across the corridor, or above you or below you. It could be just someone who you see all the time, but you never talk to them. So Mercury in Sagittarius is perhaps encouraging you to be a little bit daring, to start a conversation which you wouldn't normally have wanted to start, but you perhaps can break the ice with it. And I think if you have the courage to do that, I think the results should be okay, at least after a while. To begin with, it might be a bit stressful, but Mercury is making a mutual reception to Jupiter. Mercury is in Sagittarius. It's a sign that's ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter's in Gemini, a sign ruled by Mercury. So there's this good relationship between Mercury and Jupiter. And in general, it might be you do something that seems quite trivial, as if it's not really going anywhere, but then you find actually it's going to lots of different places, and it actually could be quite exciting. Now, one other thing about Jupiter is that Venus is making an opposition to Jupiter, and this opposition to Jupiter is going to be exact, by Sunday. And Venus opposition Jupiter could be a little bit problematic, and that's because Venus Venus is your ruler, it's opposition Jupiter. Now, Jupiter's a fortunate planet, but when you've got two fortunate planets in opposition, it's kind of like too much of a good thing. And it can be indulgent. It doesn't know when to stop. Jupiter doesn't like limits, doesn't want to be limited. And so you might, over the weekend or perhaps into Monday, just get involved in something where it just doesn't stop. Now, that might be, for example, could be spending money. It could be some indulgence, something you do out of pure pleasure, guilty pleasure. I mean, guilty pleasures, you can have too much of a good thing with every guilty pleasure. Eating, drinking, relating, having fun, whatever it is. Or it could just be indulging in your fantasies, whatever that might be, and you just get wrapped up in it. And it could be generosity. I mean, Venus opposition Jupiter is generous. It does encourage you to be generous. But I think, Libra, there is a danger perhaps of over-generosity, giving too much of yourself, of your time, perhaps even your money and your resources. Do know your limits. And, it just may be that some people take you for granted. That's possible. It's nice being generous, but up to a point. So, Libra, don't take things too far, although perhaps that Venus opposition Jupiter in a small dose is okay, provided, you get involved in something you enjoy, but before you start doing it, you create some kind of limit on it. You know how much time you're going to give to it. You know how much money you're going to spend on it. You know how much of yourself you're going to give, but you know that there is also a limit. So if you can somehow create a limit around that Venus opposition Jupiter, you may be able to enjoy it, but without having to go too far. Scorpio. Scorpio, I've been talking about Mars opposition Jupiter Mars opposition Pluto for some time. And I think that this Mars opposition Pluto it's an important aspect, and Mars is your ruler. So with Mars opposition Pluto, this is an aspect I'll be talking about in greater detail at the end of this video. With Mars opposition Pluto, you are encouraged to take things seriously. You feel that you are involved in a bit of a struggle, that nothing is easy, nothing can be taken for granted, and you perhaps also feel that it's a dangerous world where people's motivations can't always be trusted, and you do have to look after yourself. And that might be a lot to do with the Mars opposition Pluto experience. And it's important not to take things too far, but I think, Scorpio, you're going to have a good awareness of power dynamics over the weekend. How are people asserting themselves? How are you asserting themselves? And also, what do people want? And you understand all of that. And I think that should sort of put you in a sort of a position of knowledge. And so I do think with that Mars opposition Pluto, if you use it in the right way, I think it can really help you to assert yourself, and also just to help you just understand the power dynamics of the overall situation you're in. Now, one other thing about Mars is that Mars is about to change sign. In fact, I think if you're in the Americas, Mars changes sign very late on Sunday. Now, that's probably something I want to talk more about when I do do your horoscope for Monday. For Monday, that would be Monday the 4th. But with Mars changing sign, moving into Leo, it's okay. It doesn't stay in Leo for so long, because Mars does go retrograde, and it gets to 6 degrees Leo, then it goes back into Cancer. But while Mars is in Leo, it's a time, Scorpio, when you might want to think again about what you want to achieve and how you want to achieve it. And it does encourage you, I think, to be quite assertive. And you may be starting to feel that, by the end of a weekend, certainly as you move into Monday, a feeling that there is something you really want to do, you need to do, and you don't really want opposition. Indeed, you could say that you won't tolerate it. And so, as perhaps you're picking up, there is a possibility here over the weekend of there being a fair amount of animosity because you're concerned about power and who has the power. And I think you could make things a little bit easier for yourself if you found a way of telling people what's on your mind. And we've just had a new moon. What was it? On Friday we had a new moon in Scorpio, and so new moon in Scorpio. Okay, it is perhaps a time. Okay, there are some things which do need to be kept secret, but also there are also some things that need to be expressed. It's not about telling people what your secrets are. It's about telling people what you want and how you want things to be. Because at the beginning of a weekend, Mercury in Scorpio, just before it moves into Sagittarius, Mercury makes a trine to Mars. And with that Mercury trine Mars, I think this is a time when you can be very clear about what you want, what you don't want. If something's bothering you, you can tell people about it. And it might be just a good time to set the record straight and also to set the scene for the weekend. So if you are dealing with other people, family, friends, whatever, if you're working, colleagues, whoever you have to deal with over the weekend, it's a good idea to set the ground rules early. Tell people what you want, tell people what's acceptable. If you've got any complaints, perhaps you should get them out of the way. So, overall, Scorpio, I think it is a time for being fairly assertive. And as the weekend progresses, we do get planets moving into Sagittarius. The moon moves into Sagittarius, Mercury moves into Sagittarius. In other words, they're moving out of your sign, Moon, Mercury. I suppose this is a reminder that the Scorpio season is coming to an end. It's not quite over yet. The sun is still in Scorpio, but the moon is leaving Scorpio. Venus has already left Scorpio. Mercury is leaving Scorpio. So that might change the emphasis, and you may actually find yourself thinking a little bit about money. I know money is a boring subject, and there are more important things to worry about, perhaps, as far as you're concerned. But don't neglect the financial dimension. And, with Mercury moving into Sagittarius, particularly as it's making a mutual reception with Jupiter, you may have some ideas about money, and you may be thinking about money, and something may suddenly click together, and it hadn't clicked together before. And if you act on this inspiration, you may be able to, I suppose you might be able to make more money, or you may be able to safeguard your money. Maybe you'll suddenly become aware of a situation that could be financially difficult, but you're aware of it early, perhaps before anyone else is aware of it, and that perhaps would allow you to do something about it. Sagittarius, my forecasts for Sagittarius recently have been somewhat sort of all over the place, and sometimes I've been overly negative, and sort of I've suggested that you maybe be a little sort of a bit more thoughtful, a bit more philosophical. I don't know to what extent that has been appreciated, but I do think that things are on the up for Sagittarians. I mean, they have to be on the up, don't they? I mean, you already have Venus, a fortunate planet, the lesser benefic, moving through Sagittarius. And now we've got the Moon and Mercury moving through Sagittarius. And Mercury's movement into Sagittarius is especially important. And the reason Mercury's movement into Sagittarius is important is because, when Mercury moves into Sagittarius, it is in a sign, it is in your sign. And Jupiter, which is your ruler, is in Gemini. So Mercury and Jupiter are in signs which each other rules. In other words, Mercury and Jupiter are in reception. That means they get dignity. If you use a point system, the point system, for example, that William Lilly used in the 17th century in his book, The Christian Astrology, you get +5. I know it doesn't necessarily mean much, but the moment Mercury moves into Sagittarius, Jupiter gets +5. That's because Jupiter immediately gets dignity because it's in mutual reception to Mercury. So you suddenly move into a stronger position, a position which is fundamentally more powerful. And this is important because Jupiter has recently it's in Gemini, which is in its detriment. Not a great sign for Gemini. It's retrograde. That's perhaps not great. I mean, don't worry, Jupiter moves into Cancer next year. Jupiter's exalted next year when it moves into Cancer. But for the moment, Jupiter has not been in a great position. But suddenly, Mercury is in mutual reception to Jupiter. So Jupiter all of a sudden becomes much stronger. You become much stronger. And, you're able to be yourself, and you're able to enjoy whatever is on offer to a much greater extent. And I'm not just talking about the weekend, because Mercury moves into Sagittarius on Saturday evening if you're in London. It will move into Sagittarius on Sunday if you're in Australia or New Zealand or much of Asia. So it does depend on where you are, but the key point is that Mercury is moving into Sagittarius, and that allows you to look after yourself. And because you are also more confident, that means that your relations with other people should improve. You're perhaps going to be more trusting, and you're going to be also more curious. You're perhaps going to be considering, what do other people have to offer? What have other people got that you haven't? And so I think that relationships are likely to improve, and you're perhaps going to be in a position where you can maybe, enter into another person's world, into another person's reality, without feeling compromised and not feeling that you always have to be on your guard. Of course, not everyone is on your wavelength, not everyone can be trusted, but there are people there. And Mercury moving into Sagittarius might literally be someone new moving into your life. Maybe someone you don't know, maybe someone you know a little bit, but not really that well, but they move into your life with Mercury moving into Sagittarius for whatever reason. Well, it depends, doesn't it? Depends on your circumstances. They may move into your life because something has to be done, and maybe they move. Maybe it's just for a few days you have something to do with this person. You have a project, and when the project is done, everyone's done their bit and people can move on. But it may be something more substantial, or it might be perhaps a new partnership, and it could certainly be a new relationship, again, depending on your circumstances. So, the overall message I've got for you, Sagittarius, is that really things are starting to improve in a big way, and it's not just about this weekend. It is about what happens beyond this weekend. And you have a reminder here that the Sagittarius season really is starting, and it's just going to get more so. And of course, November, end of November, around November the 22nd, the Sun moves into Sagittarius. So things are improving. Don't worry. Capricorn you feel perhaps that things are happening, yes, but the question is, does it really involve you? I think that you might be aware of a certain detachment, that you understand that there are things that other people are excited about. Maybe they're really worked up about it, they're angry about it, they're really wrapped up in themselves, but it doesn't impress you. Well, Capricorn, you are a very difficult person to impress. Of all the 12 signs, people who are Capricorn, whether they've got their ascendant in Capricorn or the sun in Capricorn, moon in Capricorn, can be very difficult to impress. Displays of wealth and generosity. No, not really. You want to see something more fundamental. You want to go behind the scenes. You want to see what it's really about. And so, whatever's happening around you, it's not impressive. You need more evidence. And I think that is your view. And so Capricorn, you are going to be maybe quite self-contained, and you'll take the view that it's better to watch than to act. As far as what is the most important aspect today, or this weekend, I would have said it is an opposition between Mars and Pluto. So, Mars is on the verge of leaving Capricorn. Mars is on the verge of leaving Cancer. Pluto is on the verge of leaving Capricorn. So, in fact, Pluto is soon, in a couple of weeks' time, Pluto will be out of Capricorn into Aquarius. And that Mars opposition Pluto could actually make you feel somewhat wary. You just feel that things are not as they seem, and you do have a certain tendency to mistrust people's motives. I mean, they might be very nice people, very pleasant people, but still you want to know what their agenda is. And even if they don't have an agenda, they don't have any motives, well, then can they be trusted anyway? Maybe, do they know what they're doing? Would you put your life in their hands? Certainly not. And so Mars opposition Pluto may encourage you to be very guarded. And it's a reminder that every relationship has implications, that there is no such thing as a free lunch, and you have to consider where it's going. So that's a reason why you might just not want to get involved. And with the moon and Mercury moving into Sagittarius, it's kind of more of the same. You just feel that it's just not a time to be revealing anything, because things are unsettled. And I mean, maybe on and off it's going to be like this for the next couple of weeks, until you see some evidence that things really are stabilizing. And in fact, it may be that what you're really waiting for is for that first planet to move into Capricorn. And okay, the moon does move into Capricorn early next week, and so that might be a time when you can start to ground things, when you can start to sort of work things out. But perhaps what you'd really like is Venus to move into Capricorn as well. I mean, Venus doesn't move into... When does Venus move into Capricorn? Venus moves into Capricorn Well, Venus moves into Capricorn. I mean, quite soon. That's on November the 11th. So around November the 11th. So, that's when things are going to perhaps be a little more settled. But just at the moment, you're just not sure. And you want to actually see how things play out. Aquarius. Aquarius, we have a situation where you may want to perhaps put more emphasis into your social life. That's quite possible, because we've got planets moving into Sagittarius. We've got the Moon moving into Sagittarius, Mercury moving into Sagittarius, and what does one's social life actually mean? I suppose the concept of social life, it's a sort of term one sort of bandies around, but what does it actually mean? Is it just about parties, and gatherings? Well, not really. It's just about the people you have to deal with, or perhaps the people you'd like to deal with. They could be friends, associates, whatever. And I think Aquarius, there's perhaps work to be done here. Seeing yourself as being part of a group may be actually important, and looking at group dynamics, and how do those group dynamics work, and who is in control. So do think about that. Every group has a dynamic. Groups will cast some people as leaders, some people as followers, some people as the one who speaks, another person as a person who gets upset. Groups will cast people in different roles, and I think Aquarius, you're perhaps going to be quite aware of that sense of group dynamic, and you might then want to consider which role is the group going to cast you into. And I think this is a time where you've certainly got things to say, and you want to explain your view of the world, and your view of the world, in some respects, may be very different. They may be quite radical. It may get people to think, and I think that's part of what you want to do. You want to get people to think, and you don't want people to do things, in the normal, boring way, because things are changing, and you know that things are changing, and at the same time, you want to start to think about, where actually are you going? Because you can't just exist in the present. You can't exist in the present, and with Mercury moving into Sagittarius, there is a sense in which I think you want to jump. You want to jump ahead, perhaps far ahead, maybe years ahead, and you're thinking about years ahead and how the present relates to the future. I mean, that's going to be quite important to you, and then you have to ask, is your current situation supporting you as it should? And also, what about your ambitions? Your ambitions are important. We had a new moon yesterday, and that new moon we had a new moon on Friday, and that new moon was very much about what you want to achieve. And now, with Mercury moving into Sagittarius, and indeed with the moon moving into Sagittarius, there's also this question of why. Yes, short term you can have things you want to sort out. You can have targets, but the Sagittarius emphasis is telling you to think about the broader purpose. Just having a goal for the sake of it is, I suppose, ultimately fairly mindless. You achieve your goal, so what? And nothing's changed. you have to start to think about some broader framework for your ambitions. And maybe, Aquarius, that's what you need to do over the weekend. I mean, that could be useful, not just over the weekend, I think into next week as well. Finding that framework could actually be quite essential. And on a more mundane level, if you have had any ideas over the weekend, something you feel you really would like to do, you'd like to accomplish, obviously to begin with, and you perhaps need to keep things to yourself, but as the moon moves into Sagittarius, as the moon sort of moves away from the new moon, because the new moon is, of course, when the sun and the moon are conjunct, as the moon moves into a different sign from the sun, this may be a time when you can actually start to be more open about what you want, and I think you'll find that people will listen to you. Pisces, things are changing. I mean, things are changing for everyone, I suppose, because we've got these sign changes. We've got Mercury moving out of Scorpio into Sagittarius. We've got the moon moving out of Scorpio into Sagittarius. So we do have these sign changes. And as a result of these sign changes, it perhaps makes you a little more focused than you have been of late. You start to think about what you actually want to achieve and what you want to accomplish, and suddenly you can make the connections. You can see how one thing leads to another thing, and that leads to something else, and it's all starting to make sense. And because it's starting to make sense, you're able to make plans, and you can think about, for example, what you want to accomplish over the next few weeks, and you can be clear to yourself about it, and you can be clear to other people about it. And this Mercury moving into Sagittarius is, I think, it is good news. And Mercury is in Jupiter's sign. Jupiter rules Pisces, and so we've got a mutual reception between Mercury and Jupiter. Now, Jupiter's position recently has not been great because it's retrograde and it's in Gemini, the sign of its detriment. But Mercury moving into Sagittarius, moving into mutual reception to Jupiter, suddenly gives you a greater sense of who you are and your own power, and what actually you can accomplish. And so it really is a time to take advantage of it. Mercury will not move. Mercury is not going to stay in Sagittarius forever. So Mercury actually will move. Mercury moves into Capricorn. When does Mercury move into Capricorn? Let me just track Mercury through. So let's just think about Mercury. I mean, this is actually important because Mercury moves into Sagittarius on the 26th. It goes retrograde. So and it actually goes direct. So, in fact, good news. Because Mercury goes retrograde, Mercury is in Capricorn, Mercury is in Sagittarius through until next year. And for you, Pisces, that is good news, because it means that there is going to be a prolonged period when Mercury is going to be in mutual reception to Jupiter. A prolonged period where Jupiter is going to have dignity, where your ruling planet is going to have dignity. And so, actually, I think there is scope here for considerable optimism. And in terms of career, work, your direction, whatever your ambitions are, now's your time. Now's a time where you can really move forward. And I think that you don't have to do things alone. help is going to be available, whether it's from organizations, from people, just from the universe. It's all going to be available for you, and you're going to be able to sort of ground yourself, have a good sense of grounding, because Jupiter is in Gemini. Jupiter is in a very grounded part of your chart, and it's going to be a mutual reception to Mercury. So for many Pisceans, it can be a real reversal of fortunes. You have perhaps at times felt a bit sorry for yourself recently, but now with Mercury moving into Sagittarius, I do think that things are looking good, and it's just so nice that Mercury stays in Sagittarius for so long, because it just makes Jupiter strong for so long, right into next year. So things are looking good. So don't waste the opportunity. And those are my forecasts for the weekend. And I now want to look at the weekend from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend of November the 2nd and 3rd going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 17, which is following. And this hexagram doesn't move. So there are no moving lines. So there's not a second hexagram we need to consider. So what does that mean? I think it's fairly straightforward, particularly as it doesn't move, and perhaps indicates that maybe this weekend is not going to be as dramatic as perhaps the astrology was indicating. So following represents perhaps what we need to do to gain a following. How do we get people to take us seriously? And the I Ching is kind of suggesting that maybe if we want people to follow us, then we have to be very adaptable. And we may actually have to follow in order to follow. We have to know what it's like to follow. We have to consider the people we're trying to influence. Because, if we just tell people what to do, we just deliver our commands without any reference to how people are feeling, we're unlikely to get anywhere. So we have to really sort of listen to our feelings, listen to other people's feelings, and it's very important to be adaptable, and also not to throw our ego around, and understand that there is a time to lead and there is a time to follow, and there is actually a time to actually just withdraw from the whole thing. And so that's just all part of the balance of this hexagram. And there is a nuclear hexagram, in other words, the hexagram underneath the hexagram, and the nuclear hexagram is going to be quite low profile, and we can see what the nuclear hexagram is going to be. So it's going to be lines 3, 4, and 5 as a top trigram, and then it's 2, 3, 4 as the high trigram underneath, and that takes us to hexagram 53. So it's not that this hexagram following leads anywhere. It's just this hexagram 53 development gives us an idea about how hexagram 17 is working. And development 53, we did have this hexagram on Friday. It's about gradual progress. So we shouldn't be in a hurry. And if we want to be a leader, or if we feel that we've got something to say, we just have to be adaptable, and we have to be patient, and we need to take our time. But it does suggest in the end people are going to take us seriously. But if we want to be taken seriously, then we must make sure that we take other people seriously. And so mutual respect is going to be very important here. Anyway, so now I want to turn to the Mars-Pluto opposition, which we do have today. So looking at the Mars-Pluto opposition, let's see what's going on. So I've gone on about this Mars opposition Pluto. I think it's quite important. You know, we've got Mars in the last degree of Cancer, Pluto in the last degree of Capricorn, and so here's a chart for the opposition. I mean, this is the moment it's exactly there, which is going to be on Sunday, 11:37 a.m. London time. And you see there's Mars at 2946 Cancer and Pluto at 2946 Capricorn. And it really does feel as if there is a huge amount of pressure, that all of us are under pressure, that the world is under pressure. And I suppose this inevitably has something to do with the American elections, that it's a kind of a winner-takes-all situation. You either win or you lose. Who has the power? Either you have the power or someone else has the power. This is not, as they say, a particularly bipartisan aspect. Bipartisan, you hear that a lot, or non-partisan indeed. Non-partisan, you hear non-partisan used across the political spectrum, and at at the local level, people are always saying non-partisan. People always are partisan, but whenever someone says they're non-partisan, I just don't trust them. But it's not a particularly non-partisan or bipartisan opposition here. It's about one group and another group. One group is going to win, another group is going to lose, and that is not a nice situation to be in just before an election. And, you know, I suppose we could set this Mars-Pluto opposition up for Washington, D.C. So let's just relocate that Mars opposition Pluto. And for Washington, D.C., that's 11:37 a.m. It's London time, 11:37 a.m. So I reset it. But the chart itself is for Washington, D.C., so I suppose that would be sort of around dawn. In fact, if you're in Washington, the time the Mars-Pluto opposition is exact is sunrise. I mean, that is a new beginning. This is perhaps telling us how Mars-Pluto opposition is going to have an impact on the US, and it's going to be a time of animosity. Huge animosity. Sunrise. This is the beginning of a very partisan environment where I suppose people are going to be at each other's throats. This is the new reality. Though I should remind you that this Mars-Pluto opposition does go back and forth, because what happens is Mars goes into Leo, then it goes retrograde, so we're going to get another Mars-Pluto opposition soon enough, and then Mars is going to go retrograde, and then next year Mars will go direct. It'll go back into Leo. So we're going to get 3 Mars-Pluto oppositions, and this is the first one. So, you know, I don't think there's any reason to regard the Mars-Pluto opposition as being fortunate, at least in terms of how it's going to impact the United States. But of course, it's not the only aspect to consider. So I now want to just look at a few people who have Mars-Pluto oppositions in their horoscopes, and also a couple of events. So one person who's going to be influenced by this Mars-Pluto opposition is the governor of Pennsylvania. I don't know his time of birth, Josh Shapiro. So remember, Josh Shapiro was passed over as being a vice presidential candidate. A lot of people think that Kamala Harris made a big mistake choosing Tim Walz rather than Josh Shapiro. If she loses the election, that means she's probably going to have lost Pennsylvania. And if she had chosen Josh Shapiro, who is a popular governor, as her running mate, then I think for sure she would have taken Pennsylvania, and she would have, well, I mean, we don't know the result yet, but Josh Shapiro is someone who is very focused on power, and that Mars-Pluto is going to be particularly important for him if Kamala Harris loses, because if Kamala Harris loses, there is a view that Josh Shapiro actually now wants Kamala Harris to lose, because if Kamala Harris wins, then when is his next chance to have a reasonable go at running for the presidency? But if Kamala Harris loses, he's going to be in a very good position for getting the Democrat nomination for the 2028 election. So that Mars-Pluto, he's got it in his chart. He's got Mars quite close to the Aries point, Mars in the last degree of Pisces, Pluto in Libra. So I don't know how he's going to be impacted by this Mars-Pluto opposition. It's not the fact that the Mars-Pluto opposition aspects his chart. It's just that because he has a Mars-Pluto opposition, he may be sensitive to when there is a Mars-Pluto opposition in the sky. So I think that, if Harris loses, we can expect this already very ambitious man to be even more ambitious. Though I think there are other people who are going to be thinking about that nomination. I think that, am I right in saying that Gavin Newsom, I think he has a Mars-Pluto square, I think off the top of my head, maybe another hard aspect. I think it's a Mars-Pluto square. But that's Josh Shapiro. The governor of Pennsylvania has Mars-Pluto opposition. So Mars in Pisces, opposition Pluto. Who else has that? Our old friend, Justin Trudeau. Well, we know all about his Mars opposition Pluto. He was born a sort of a Mars cycle before Josh Shapiro. So Mars opposition Pluto, I don't have to say anything more about Justin Trudeau. Clearly someone who is very focused on power, hanging on to power. I know that his coalition is under a lot of pressure, but with that Mars-Pluto opposition, he's going to really want to stick with it. Though, like Josh Shapiro, Justin Trudeau may be influenced by the Mars opposition Pluto happening over the weekend, may be encouraging him to really hold on. So another, from the Republican side, she was a Democrat in 2020, but now she's joined the Republican Party, is Tulsi Gabbard. So Tulsi Gabbard has her Mars at 20 Aries and her Pluto at 22 Libra. And so, again, like Josh Shapiro, she's going to be very much influenced by this election result. And that election result is going to trigger her Mars-Pluto opposition, whichever way it is. In terms of her and power, I suppose with Mars-Pluto opposition, she is someone, Mars in Aries. I mean, she is a super Aries, Tulsi Gabbard. Mercury, Mars, Sun, Venus in Aries. And, she's got Pluto opposition Sun, and she's got Pluto opposition Mars. In fact, she's got Pluto opposition Venus. So a very Pluto kind of person, very much into power, into control. Maybe if you're perhaps a critic of Tulsi Gabbard, maybe she felt she didn't get her way in the Democrat Party, so she switched sides and moved to the Trump view. I mean, that could be if you're a cynic about it. And I think she might have been quite a dangerous vice presidential candidate if he'd chosen her over Tulsi Gabbard over J.D. Vance. I think she's maybe a little bit of a loose cannon, but Tulsi Gabbard, Mars-Pluto, she certainly takes herself seriously, and concepts of power and control are going to be important to her. I was thinking about Mars-Pluto oppositions in female charts, and Mars is a planet which it's a male planet, and so you might expect a woman who has Mars-Pluto opposition perhaps to project her Mars onto the men in her life, or she might attract Mars-Pluto kind of men. But maybe there's an alternative way of looking at it. Maybe if a woman has Mars-Pluto opposition, she holds on to her Mars. maybe she doesn't want to project that Mars. I mean, it's just a theory. I was just thinking about it. Maybe Pluto wants to hold on to things, and maybe a woman who has Mars opposition Pluto is able to assert her power, very strongly, and she's not going to give it away to the men in her life. I mean, that's just a possibility. And there are other strong women who have Mars-Pluto opposition, at least politically strong. This is a woman I know nothing about, but she was going to be a candidate. She was put forward by the Left Alliance in France as a potential as Mitterrand's. It's not Mitterrand. I mean Macron's prime minister, and the Left wanted. Her name is Lucie Castex, and she is a very establishment figure, been through all the establishment schools, and she was completely well placed to being selected as prime minister. But no, Macron didn't want her, and she has Mars opposition Pluto. So again, I don't know anything about Lucie Castex, but I would have said with this leading French politician, she's young, she's still in her late 30s, and already a candidate to be prime minister. She is perhaps someone to watch. I mean, she has a great sense of her own power, and she's not giving it away to any man. Well, in fact, I think she's. I'm not that this means anything, but Mars opposition Pluto. I think she's gay, and she's in a same-sex relationship. I don't know. You read whatever you like into that Mars opposition Pluto, but she's not She's not giving out Mars away. I would have said she's keeping it to herself. But again, I must emphasise that I don't really know much about her. Now, someone who is the French Prime Minister is Michel Barnier. So Michel Barnier has Mars opposition Pluto, very close Mars opposition Pluto. Michel Barnier is a man who is very ambitious. I think he wanted to be French president. Maybe he still thinks he can be French president. I mean, he's born in 1951, so he's next year 25. He's going to be, next birthday he will be 74, but I suppose he's still young enough, I suppose, to be French president. And here is someone who is very ambitious. He was EU's chief negotiator with Brexit negotiations against the UK, with the UK. Apparently he did a very good job. He ran rings around the British team, and he's now prime minister, and he's a very manipulative person, I would have said. He knows what he wants, and Emmanuel Macron would be unwise to underestimate him. At least I think he's still prime minister. I mean, you really have to watch what's happening with French politics. Maybe I've missed it. Maybe he's no longer French prime minister. I think I surely would have heard that he's no longer French prime minister, but he does have Mars opposition Pluto. Now, going back to another female politician, a very, very powerful female politician, and not someone you necessarily want to mess with, is Kim Yo-jong. Now, I don't know for sure that she was born on September 27, 2007. There is a view that she's born in 2009, but the date Wikipedia gives for Kim Yo-jong is September 27, 2007. She is the sister of Kim Jong-un, and if Kim Jong-un were to drop dead, I think it's very likely that she would take over North Korea, and she is a very, very powerful woman. Maybe she's the second most powerful person in North Korea, and she has Mars, assuming his birth date is correct, Mars at 29 Gemini, Pluto at 26 Sagittarius. So yeah, she is not someone you want to mess with, and she's not giving away that Mars opposition Pluto. Okay, she has men in her life who are powerful. I suppose her father and of course her brother. These are powerful men, but she is holding on to the power. She's not giving it away. Maybe she's really holding on to it. So maybe women with Mars opposition Pluto should perhaps not be underestimated. And Of course, it can all get a bit destructive. One chart I often look at is Magda Goebbels. Now, she is someone who perhaps did project her Mars opposition Pluto. She was the wife of Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, and she was very attracted to powerful people. I think her first husband was actually Jewish, but when the Nazis came to power, I think she divorced her first husband. I think it's right. Correct me if I'm wrong. But she was very attracted to Nazism and Nazis, and attracted to Hitler, and attracted to his propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. And so there is her Mars. Where's her Mars at 20 Sagittarius, opposition Pluto at 18 Gemini, and she was quite sort of destroying in the end, that Mars opposition Pluto. At the end, she killed her children before she and her husband killed themselves. So you could say that is Mars opposition Pluto at its very worst. And finally, Russell Brand, YouTube star, comedian, Mars opposition Pluto. He's kind of constantly sort of reinventing himself. I mean, he did start as someone who's very much on the left, but to an extent he has sort of embraced sort of populist causes, and asking questions about the war in Ukraine, asking questions about about vaccination. I think that's the thing he asks questions a lot about, but. He has a slightly populist view, and there is his Mars opposition Pluto. So clearly he's a charismatic, powerful person, Mars opposition Pluto. A lot of people can't stand him, but I think a lot of people adore him. And he's got Mars in Aries, and he's got Moon in Aries, Mars in Aries, Jupiter in Aries. So yeah, so quite an assertive person, and very focused on himself and what he believes in. And remember Tulsi Gabbard had Mars in Aries opposition Pluto, and she sort of reinvented herself, didn't she? A few events with Mars opposition Pluto. Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister with Mars opposition Pluto, I think. There's Mars, 21 Aries, Pluto, 21 Libra. So she, powerful Prime Minister, she takes over as Mars makes the opposition to Pluto. So I remember watching it on television. It was kind of inappropriate. As she took over, as she went into Downing Street, she quoted from St. Francis of Assisi, but I can't remember quite, about creating peace and harmony and all of this kind of stuff. You can look it up. That her quotation from Francis of Assisi seems to me to be completely the opposite of what she actually did in practice. She was a very divisive woman. People liked her or they hated her, and she did create a lot of division in British society, which in many ways still exists. And there is Mars opposition Pluto. Another event, European Union enlargement on May the 1st, 2004. Slovakia, Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic joined the European Union. Mars opposition Pluto, Mars 25 Gemini, Pluto 21 Sagittarius. The EU, power, control, enlarging itself. That's one way you can see Mars opposition Pluto, but the Mars opposition Pluto is not particularly exact. And two charts of a rather unpleasant charts, we could say the first time the electric chair was used. This is the time when the victim of the electric chair walked into the room. I don't know what the time he was actually executed was, but you can see Mars was applying to an opposition of Pluto. So I suppose you could see Mars opposition Pluto as being quite electric, perhaps violent. Look at Mars opposition Saturn. It's not just Mars opposition Pluto. Mars square Pluto Saturn. Mars is and Saturn square Saturn is about death. It's opposition Pluto in this rather bizarre, to be honest, a cruel and unusual way to die. But that's Mars opposition Pluto square Saturn. And finally, there was the Matsumoto attack. The Matsumoto attack was when there was a sarin attack on the Tokyo metro system, and which quite a few people died and others were sort of injured, and it was an attack perpetrated by this cult, and at the time of this attack, Mars was at 25 Taurus, pretty close to Algol, and Mars at 25, 27 Taurus, Pluto at 25, 41 Scorpio. So Mars opposition Pluto, Mars on Algol. That does give you the idea of something unpleasant happening, and of a Pluto nature. I suppose sarin as nerve gas, something in very small quantities that causes a huge amount of damage. Anyway, that's it with Mars opposition Pluto. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very happy if you were to like it. If you are not subscribed, I'd be super happy if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you again very soon.